Hello and welcome. I'm Amritanshu Rai and you're watching Law of the Land on Rajya Sabha TV. Today we bring to you the Supreme Court judgment on partially legitimizing live-in relationship. To discuss the issue, I have with me former Judge of the High Court Justice R.S. Sodhi and Senior Advocate Pinky Anand. Now for the headlines. A man and a woman living together without marriage cannot be construed as an offence, says Supreme Court. A long-standing live-in relationship is as good as marriage in the eyes of the law, and if it leads to birth of a child, the child will not be illegitimate. And the Supreme Court's decision sets aside the arrangement put in place by the Delhi High Court, which said that the relationship is of no legal consequence. A long-standing live-in relationship is as good as marriage in the eyes of the law. And if the relationship leads to the birth of a child, the child will not be illegitimate and will have a right to maintenance. The Supreme Court, in many of its judgments, has recognized the right of a woman and a child in a marriageless live-in relationship, but at the same time is conscious not to promote live-in relationships.
The Supreme Court is at the forefront of dealing with the fast-changing society and its legal requirements. The Supreme Court has in one of its judgments observed that a man and woman living together without marriage cannot be construed as an offence. But at the same time, the courts have consciously excluded a woman from claiming maintenance if their relationship does not qualify for the phrase "as good as marriage." The woman in such a case will not even be given protection available under the Domestic Violence Act.
Well, it's a progressive step because the fact is people live together. The only thing is it's in concealment. Once you declare it open, you also incur the liability to maintain the person. You can't just have a free ride. You should give her the same respect as wife and give her the same rights as wife. Maintenance, provisions, not being violent, you will be covered under the Domestic Violence Act because relationship in the nature of marriage is as good as marriage for legal purposes now.
Let us look at the various criteria that the court has laid down for live-in relationship to qualify for as good as marriage status. The court has laid down that if a man and woman living under the same roof and cohabiting together for a number of years will be presumed to be married. And in a situation like this, if a child is born out of the relationship, the child will not be considered illegitimate. However, the woman can claim alimony from her partner only if their relation lives up to conditions like the couple must hold themselves out to the society as being akin to spouses. They must be of legal age to marry. They must be qualified to enter into a legal marriage, including being unmarried. If a man has a keep whom he maintains financially and uses mainly for sexual purpose or as a servant, it would not be a relationship akin to marriage.
In a live-in relationship, it would be the same unmarried man living with the married woman who is having a live-in relationship, which you are legitimizing and recognizing under the Domestic Violence Act. So there will be some cases, not all cases, but very often many cases of overlap. In one case, it's legal. In another case, it's a criminal offense.
The court has clarified that merely a one-night stand or spending a weekend together will not be considered as a domestic relationship. But if a relationship is of substantial time, it can't be termed as walk-in and walk-out one. True that a child born out of a live-in relation will not be illegitimate anymore, but he will only be a rightful heir to his parents' self-acquired property. His right to his parents' ancestral property has been denied. With camera person Shivi, Reshma Roy, Rajya Sabha TV.
The court has not been able to specify the duration of long-standing. So my question to you is, they have gone ahead and said in the Supreme Court that long-standing marriage, long-standing live-in will be as good as marriage or akin to marriage. Now, since they have not specified long-standing, how do you understand the term long-standing?
I personally feel that the Supreme Court has left much to be desired. If at all it wanted to legalize it and make it a marriage, then it should have been more specific in what it wants to say. Merely saying that long-standing is sufficient and should be akin to marriage does not suffice, because what is long-standing would itself be debatable, and once you leave a question debatable, the judgment is incomplete. And therefore, I feel that this will only give rise to more problems than what it sorts than the solutions.
Ma'am, to you, you've participated in hearing of such matter. In fact, you've been a counsel to that famous actress Khushbu. Ma'am, what do you understand, or what do you get out of this long-standing, and how do you interpret this phrase long-standing? Is it 1 year, 2 year, 3 year, 5 year, 10 year, or 6 months?
See, that's a problem, as Justice Sodhi is saying quite rightly. This area has been left in a very grey kind of domain. But let me just tell you what I think seems to have happened. We started coming up with laws which are liberal, one after the other. We are trying to liberalize laws, and in the name of gender justice, there is an attempt to make it even more liberal than what may possibly be required. So, live-in was thrown into the Domestic Violence Act for the first time. Before that, there was no concept of giving any protection, though live-in was not illegal as per the law, because there isn't, as far as consenting adults are concerned. So, you had a liberal law being made, but the liberal law possibly went way beyond what it was. Frankly, I personally was very hassled as to how this law would stand in place. Here you have a man who has liability, if at all. I don't mean liability as a payment. I mean liability of a relationship in 3 directions. A, with a wife, a married wife, duly legitimate wife. B, an ex-wife if he had one. And C, a live-in relationship. So, at any given point of time, you could have a variety of categories of women claiming rights on this family. Not only men. You see, the point is not, we are looking at society and looking at family. So, frankly, I was personally quite disconcerted, and I think that is what seems to have happened even in the Supreme Court. They were disconcerted possibly with the wide ambit of what might be construed out of live-in. They wanted to curtail it, but at the same time didn't want to go all the way. So this was a kind of some medium found, leaving it open for some subsequent maybe judgments to come down to specifying. But definitely one thing that the Supreme Court has made quite clear, and I am very happy it has, because it takes away from this very high liberal Western pseudo psychology that is being floated around. This walk-in, walk-out relationship is not part of live-in relationships as understood in India at least. So, I am very glad that we made that very clear distinction. But the duration, that is always going to be debatable, but what seems to be even culled out from the various judgments is, you are not talking about even a year or 2 years. You are talking about way beyond, maybe literally a decade or so. For example, the last case in which the illegitimate children issues came up, in that case it was literally 30 odd years. In the other years, in the other cases it was more than 10 years at any given point of time. So, if you take a hallmark, though that should be clarified so that it becomes certain unto society, you know, because indefinite law is not good for society. You must define it.
I'll bring in Mr. Justice Sodhi. Justice Sodhi, there the court has also tried to ensure that even if you have live-in, you should be able to stand up to the society as akin to spouses. This is very clear. So, what they have tried to do is that even if you are living in, there also you have to ensure that in the society that you move in, you have to appear as if you are man and wife. Now, do you see a dichotomy there? Does that, because most of the live-ins are concealed and are not open live-in. We are not still that open a society to allow open live-ins.
See, if you are not that open a society to allow live-in and accept it as live-in, do you think by an order of court it becomes acceptable? I mean, there must be something left to the Parliament also. I mean, you are the people of India. You will decide for yourself what you want rather than be thrust down your throat that this is acceptable now, carry on with it. I mean, that is something which I do not reconcile with. However, since Supreme Court is final, not always right, I believe that there is plenty of room for improvement in whatever the Supreme Court has said, and maybe we the people would agree to that.
Next time onwards, it may just end up improving upon its order. Okay, that's fine. Ma'am, the question to you, same question. Isn't the court pushing the long-standing live-in relationship towards acceptability by the society. By the society. Isn't that the way the court is?
To some extent, yes. To some extent, no.
Why?
I'll tell you why. To some extent, yes, I say, because, for example, you did not have the concept of live-in relationship entitled for any kind of maintenance under the criminal procedure, under 125 of the CRPC. But the Supreme Court has held that if it is so under Domestic Violence Act, then the same should be permissible under the Criminal Procedure Code too. And the other side, on the flip side, I'll say it's trying to limit it, because had the undefined expression as is there in domestic violence be allowed to continue, then it could have been interpreted otherwise. So I think in its own way, Supreme Court has tried to strike a balance. And yes, I mean, I'll tell you one thing which we are here now attempting. Some of the observations in some of the judgments definitely lead to this wider acceptability notion, literally to say it is acceptable. I again have some doubts here, because live-in relationship by its very nature is not amenable to society. What they want, what live-in relationships really want is, we want out of society. We don't want to be bounded by society. We don't want rules and regulations of society. We want to be free.
Then why push them
Then
towards
why
society?
push them into a legal umbrella
Yeah.
when they themselves disclaim it by their own desire?
Yeah, I get it. It's time for us to head into a break. When we come back, we will tell you about the arrangement put into place by the Delhi High Court. Welcome back. The Supreme Court's decision to legitimize live-in relationships overrules the existing arrangement which was set in place by the Delhi High Court's judgment. The High Court had ruled that live-in relationship is a walk-in and walk-out sort, and neither of the partners can complain of infidelity if one ditches the other.
The Delhi High Court had delivered this judgment after hearing criminal proceedings initiated by a live-in partner of a London-based solicitor. The lady had complained that the solicitor had refused to marry despite live-in relationship. The court had ordered quashing of the FIR, saying this will prevent misuse of the criminal justice system for personal vengeance.
The live-in relationships, people want to remain out of a formal relationship and out of the boundaries of law. So it's a very peculiar kind of situation. I think we'll have to really settle this entire circumstance, because we don't necessarily want to legitimize what is called walk-in, walk-out relationships, or fly-by-night varieties of relationships.
According to the Delhi High Court, live-in relationship is a walk-in and walk-out relationship. There are no strings attached in this relationship, nor does this relationship create any legal bond between the parties. People who chose to have live-in relationship cannot complain of infidelity or immorality, as live-in relationships can be between a married man and an unmarried woman and vice versa. Based on these findings, the Delhi High Court had said that walking out of a live-in relationship will not have any legal consequence.
Walk in and walk out, there cannot be any civil proceedings or civil consequences. That is understandable, because there is no civil relation. You have not entered into a civil equation of marriage, whether it is under the Hindu Marriage Act, under the Muslim Marriage Act, under the Indian Christian.
The Delhi High Court's judgment applies to live-in partners and not to children born out of such a relationship. But the Supreme Court has gone ahead and expanded the rights of a woman and child who may be victims of long-duration live-in relation. The Supreme Court has gone to the extent of granting a share of self-acquired property of the father to a child born of a live-in relationship. Unlike marriage, which is legal, there is no legal document that binds the two individuals together in a live-in relationship. So as long as it suits them, they can share a lifestyle quite like a married couple with no strings attached. With the Supreme Court legalizing live-in relations in India, can we now say that the Indian society is definitely moving westward? With camera person Siddharth, Reshma Roy, Raj Sabha TV.
From no legal consequence to reasonable legal rights. Will this encourage the idea of live-in relationship? My question to you, ma'am, is, the first question is, how true is how the Delhi High Court felt? They were very clear and categorical that it has no legal consequences, and we should not, the court was very conscious that we should not recognize or give any even reasonable legal rights to a live-in relationship. How true is that?
See, as I said, my belief is that we, in the attempt to copy and ape the West, think we are liberalizing ourselves by going into such concepts. The fact that it is there is correct. The fact that it should not be condemned, it is part of society, that is correct. The fact that marriage is the basis of family and society, that is also correct. The fact that there is law to regulate relationships which form part of the entire nation, state, or the family structure, that is something which is sacrosanct. And I think we must realize one thing, that if you want to have relationships which are outside the trappings of law, then let us not claim the privileges of law. Either you have rights and duties together.
Yeah.
You can't say, I'll have the rights but I will not perform the duties.
Okay.
So you want to live in, fine, so be it. If you are adult enough and you want to take that decision, it may be right or wrong, that's for you to decide and for society to decide on a moral platform. But as far as law is concerned, there is no basis for giving a sanction to that relationship and giving rights without duties.
Sir, do you agree with the Delhi High Court's order and what was eventually set aside by another judgment of the Supreme Court, and they were much more liberal and acceptable to this new concept of live-in. So do you see reason in the Delhi High Court's order? It was very clear, crystal clear.
You see, Delhi High Court, as far as I think, was more pragmatic, was dealing with a situation which was self-created by two consenting adults. It was up to them to decide how they wanted to live, how they wanted to bind themselves into what kind of a relationship. There was no illegality in any case attached to it. So where was the question of thrusting upon them a legality otherwise than what they had decided for? The Supreme Court, of course, went a little ahead and wanted to sort of legitimize what was already legitimate.
Yeah.
So in doing that, it may have sort of tripped over a bit and caused more problems.
But as a precedent, it has happened. It's a reality for most
Actually,
of
what
us.
the Supreme Court tried was, he's right there. I don't think the attempt was so much to deal with live-in as live-in alone. The idea was to call common law marriage as marriage, and which in law is already there. Actually, 114 of the Evidence Act contemplates that if you are living together as husband and wife, holding yourself out to society, then for all purposes there's a presumption you are married, and there's been an earlier judgment also which says that common law marriage is marriage for all purposes.
But here they've gone to the extent of recognizing the rights of the child,
That's where,
keeping out the Hindu
that's
Marriage Act, and they've gone on to say that he will have right to
You're
property
absolutely right.
in the self-acquired property
that,
of the
that is where
father.
that is where
And also
possibly-
maintenance for the woman.
That's where you've overstepped. No, maintenance for women in a common law marriage would arise.
Would
There's no
arise.
issue.
But
the
for
illegitimate child having a right in self-acquired property
He's
is
no
where-
longer illegitimate.
Where the subject starts. Though under law, again, you know, if you go back to the law, if you are married in the sense of if there is any voidness to the marriage or the marriage is null and void for any reason, the child of such a marriage is considered legitimate for all purposes under the Hindu Marriage Act, for example. So that is itself not a variation, but the manner in which it might have been put forth could possibly lead people astray.
A radical question to you. Why not? Why can't we have a free society? Why not allow live-in? Legitimize it.
No, nobody says it's illegitimate.
Why is there a reason for one to stick to the institution of marriage?
Not necessary at all. Because, see, we accept that two consenting adult human beings are entitled to live as they like. It's acceptable. But then to build in your own rights into a particular action is where the rub lies. Now here, why do we see a live-in relationship need not necessarily be only cohabitation. You may divorce cohabitation, live together, cohabitate elsewhere. It's also permissible. I mean, it will not become an offense again. So again, you say legitimize the marriage and legitimize the offspring of that. There are lots of things that you must consider before bringing in an action of this sort.
Right. It's time for us to head into a break. When we come back, we will show you an interview with former chairperson of National Commission for Women, Purnima Advani. Welcome back. My colleague Reshma Roy spoke to Purnima Advani, former chairperson of National Commission for Women, and tried to get a point of view.
What will be the impact of this judgment in future?
Well, I don't really, what happens is when a judgment is delivered, we feel there's going to be the world of an impact and something is going to significantly change in society. I don't think that really happens in practical parlance, because the ripple effect of every judgment in society ultimately takes its own course.
The bench has said that if the partners are cohabiting together for a long period of time and are holding themselves up to the society as spouses, then the relationship will be as good as marriage. But it has not specifically mentioned any fixed term of years they have to be together.
They would not get any rights qua each other unless and until they have cohabited for a fairly long duration of time. The duration of time has not yet been specified. If these instances keep enhancing, then situation would demand that law should specify a time frame.
Where at one side the judgment legalizes live-in relationships, but it excludes the women from the protection of Domestic Violence Act until the relationship is of the nature of marriage.
I think this is quite fair, that if a person is cohabiting with another for a day, for 2 days, for 3 days, that seems to be happening more and more oftener these times. And then to think that because of a 3-day cohabitation, that woman should get all the rights which a wife who has taken the responsibilities of matrimony would normally get is absurd. I am a little conservative in my views. I would say that a wife is a wife. A live-in is a live-in. Let that demarcation never be blurred.
If a child is born out of this relationship, what right will he have on his father?
Here, if she is not taken up by the family, she continues in an illegitimate relationship, then the persons who are responsible for that child may be the father and the mother, but why necessarily the entire joint family property or a co-partnery property? That may not be. The family may not be responsible, but it would be the immediate parents who are solely responsible for the birth of the child.
How do you see this judgment?
Come what may, Supreme Court or any court must draw this clear distinction between a wife who has got all the legitimate rights, who has got all the legitimized responsibilities, who has got the care, the concern, the security for the child, the protection that a child should have.
How important is it to be liberal in matters relating to live-in relationship? My question to you, sir, just a second back, there was a point being made, the thrill of live-in relationship has been destroyed by this judgment. How do you react to that?
I react very positively.
As it
I say the very thrill of live-in relationship was the manner in which every adult wanted to live together. That has been destroyed by putting do's and don'ts. And these do's and don'ts were already there in the marriage. So I might as well get married than have a live-in relationship.
How do you react to that?
It's actually, it doesn't make sense. As I said, I don't know why we are focusing so much attention on live-in. It was legal, it is legal, there is no illegality to it. Let us not try to put the stamp and approval of legality on something which they themselves do not want or desire. They want to be out, let them be out. They want to live it. There's a very small percentage, Amritanshu. We're not having a whole large cross-section of Indian society still being there. And let me tell you, let us pay a little more attention to trying to stabilize the institutions we have. We are destroying so many other features. The economy gets destroyed.
No, when you have examples of this kind in Bollywood, where people...
It's only Bollywood.
No, not
Bollywood
Bollywood
is not copied by everybody.
No, but there is an impact.
There is an impact, but it is always to say, I wish I could be like that. People still don't translate it for themselves, rest assured. You know, this kind of impact, as you say, Bollywood, only a rare cases, if you'll have a robbery there, somebody will go rob a bank, maybe that does happen. Same thing with live-in, but it's not as if every second person is having a live-in relationship in society. I think, you know, we need to kind of translate ourselves into a reality check and to say, do we want this kind of society where everybody has a happy so-called relationship, lives in and lives out and walks out of any relationship, there is no security, there is no stability, and there is no
Okay,
family
a radical
function.
question.
Yes.
Why not do away with any kind of legal framework for such things.
You lead into
if you
collapse.
are trying to legitimize live-in back through the back door,
Don't
then
do
why
it through
not
the
have
back door or
anything at
front.
all?
See, according to what I believe, don't do it through the back door or front door. Leave it alone. Leave it outside all the purviews of all these legalities. Let them deal with whatever they want in society without any moral or other sanction. Moral maybe, because society wants to have itself with another, without any legal sanction to criminalizing it or to have any civil consequences, penal consequences. Don't try to bring them within the reign of law. At the same time, let us pay a little more attention, because our whole society, incidentally, is based on the stability of the family unit as a basic unit of survival. And if we do anything extinction with that, rest assured we will be left, I mean, whether 2012 is the last year of our existence or not, but then very soon we are going to have, you know, people roaming around with any liabilities or rights, children without any issues as to parenthood and whatever else, and that doesn't sound like a very secure society to me.
So, yeah, the point you were making.
You know, I feel society is not ready for animal existence as yet. Therefore, these institutions which have built themselves up over centuries and centuries of trying and testing methods need not be just trampled so trivially and permit them to build themselves into stronger units rather than breaking them down,
Right.
or trivializing them to such an extent and lionizing this relation of live-in systems. I think there should be a reasonable drawing of line, except where they want to, people who want to welcome to that, but do not trivialize marriage itself.
Marriage itself. On that, thank you, sir and ma'am, for joining us on this discussion. It is time for us to end the show. You can email your suggestions and comments to law.rstv@gmail.com. You can also watch our shows on the YouTube. We'll be back with a new issue and a new episode. Keep watching Rajya Sabha TV.